Hello everybody, this is Sir Jet and welcome to another episode of the Rizal Lectures. Today I am here inside a mall in Binondo, Manila. Do you know that the Rizal family used to live here in Binondo? Yes, that's after the Spaniards evicted them from Calamba because of a land dispute. Binondo is special for Rizal as he based many scenes in his two novels on the actual day-to-day life here in Binondo. One example is the house of Capitan Tiago. It is actually based on the house of a true-to-life Binondo merchant named Balbino Mauricio. Let's learn more by going now to our lecture. Today we will have a simple analysis of Rizal's most famous novel, the Noli Me Tangere. Let us begin with the title. Noli Me Tangere is a Latin sentence which means touch me not. In Rizal's letter to Blumentritt, he admitted that he got the title of his first novel from the Bible, specifically from John 20 verse 17. That's the story of Mary Magdalene seeing the risen Jesus outside his tomb. Mary Magdalene wanted to hug or touch Jesus, but Jesus said, "Do not touch me because I haven't ascended yet to the Father." Meanwhile, in the introduction of the Noli Me Tangere, Rizal explained that he likened Philippine society to a man with cancer. Rizal, being a doctor, is very familiar with this disease. Cancer has 4 stages, and the last stage is stage 4. That's the time when the cancer victim would be in very extreme pain because the cancer cells have spread all over his body. A little touch on the cancer patient would cause extreme pain. The cancer patient would scream because of the excruciating pain. Similarly, Rizal would want to say that Philippine society under Spanish colonial rule symbolically is in stage 4 cancer. A little touch by the Spaniards, one more little abuse, and Philippine society would explode in a revolution. That's why many people say that this novel is really very subversive. Do you know that the Noli Me Tangere was originally written in Spanish, not in Tagalog? And that its first translation was into the English language. It was done in 1912 by an American translator. And the title of the English translation was The Social Cancer, because Rizal wrote in the introduction that Philippine society is sick, just like a man with cancer. Furthermore, in the introduction, Rizal mentioned that the people and the events in his novel are actually representations of Philippine society in the past decade. Rizal wrote the Noli in the 1880s, so he was referring to the events in the 1870s. He's saying that what you will read in this novel are the typical things that happened in the 1870s. And what big event happened in the 1870s? The death of the Gomburza. And during that time, there were grave abuses of the Spaniards on the Filipino people, and there were also rumors of a brewing revolution. And Rizal put all these things together in his novel. Now, for the simple analysis of the novel, we will look one by one at the characters of Noli Me Tangere because they represent several themes or ideas that Rizal wanted to convey through his writings. Let us begin with the lead character, Crisostomo Ibarra. He is a Filipino who studied abroad, and upon his return to the Philippines, he had a lot of liberal ideas that he wanted to implement or he wanted to share to his countrymen. He wanted his country to implement what was being implemented in Europe, and that is democracy, liberalism, advancement in education. And so Crisostomo Ibarra represents the idealistic youth, the ilustrados, the elite Filipinos who studied abroad and learned and experienced liberalism there. Crisostomo Ibarra says that education is the key to make life better here in the Philippines. That's why he wanted to build schools so the Filipino youth can be educated and not be ignorant. So as you can see, Crisostomo Ibarra resembles the real Jose Rizal. He represents Rizal's diplomatic side. In contrast, Elias represents Rizal's revolutionary side. Elias is a character that represents the Filipino masses. And instead of education, the message of his life is revolution is the solution. Many would say that Elias resembles Bonifacio in so many ways. At this time when Rizal was writing his novel, he has not yet met Bonifacio. We can deduce that there are many Andres Bonifacios out there in the 1870s. There were many people from the masses who were discontented with the Spanish authorities, and they're very, very close to organizing a revolution. Maria Clara is another key character in the Noli. She represents the maidens in Rizal's time. She is the icon of purity and beauty. The women during that time were very religious and very loyal to their respective boyfriends. An interesting thing to do is to compare Maria Clara to her 21st century counterparts. Look around. Do you see many Maria Claras today? Are the young women today still very religious? What are the things they do? Remember that art is a reflection of the times. So Rizal's novel reflects the 1870s. It shows the kind of life people lived during that time. Maria Clara's adoptive father is Capitan Tiago. He's a Filipino with a local government position, and he represents the rich and ambitious natives. During Rizal's time, some Filipinos were given positions by the Spaniards, and many of them got that position because they were sip-sip to the priests and the military, and because they were friends of the Spaniards or they were favorites of the Spaniards, they were blind to the Spaniards' abuses on their fellow Filipinos. The victims of abuse couldn't just approach the Capitan Tiagos out there because they wouldn't help their countrymen. And so the Filipino masses or the victims of abuse had nowhere to run to. And so a revolution is really, really ripe during that time. Capitan Tiago also symbolizes colonial mentality. Even though he's brown and a native of the islands, he wanted to become a Spaniard, or he wanted to have what the Spaniards have. That's why he wanted to have a big house, many servants, have power, and be looked up by the people. The main villain in the novel is Padre Damaso. He represents the typical friar in Rizal's time. He's a glutton and he's sexually engrossed to Filipina women. He's somebody that you don't want to run into because if you become his enemy, he will really make sure that you get pulverized. He loves humiliating his enemies in his sermons and in many other ways. He is very abusive of his power. And so there are many friars of this type during Rizal's time. Padre Damaso's sidekick is Padre Salvi, and Rizal put other traits of friars in this character. He's very lustful of Maria Clara, he's cunning and scheming, and he keeps a lot of secrets. And so Spanish priests and friars during that time knew a lot of secrets of the community. Why? How? Because people confessed to them in the confession box. The biggest secret that Padre Salvi knew was that Maria Clara is the daughter of Padre Damaso. Padre Damaso impregnated the wife of Capitan Tiago, and Capitan Tiago does not know it. And remember, Rizal said that these are typical things that happened 10 years prior to his writing. So there were many cases like this in the 1870s in real life. Another character in the Noli is Doña Victorina. She is a Filipina married to a Spaniard. She represents the Filipino social climbers. The Doña Victorinas were aloof towards their fellow natives. Doña Victorina is also an opportunist. She married a foreigner just to fulfill her dreams. And so out of the masses, she was able to rise up and occupy a space in the higher level of Philippine society. She became richer because she married a Spaniard. Sounds familiar? Today in the 21st century, do you see many Filipinas who do the same? So this practice of social climbing was already existent more than 100 years ago. The husband of Doña Victorina is Don Tiburcio, and he represents the typical civilian Spaniard in the Philippines. He is not the cream of the crop of the Spaniards because the better off Spaniards were staying in Spain. The most intelligent, the most handsome Spaniards were back home in Europe. And the ones who go here in the Philippines during that time were adventurers. The ones who get appointed here as officials were not the best of the best officials of the Spanish race, because the best of the best were there in Spain. But nonetheless, the Spaniards sent here were like rock stars in the eyes of the natives. The Filipinos would look up to them as really very, very handsome, very, very great, and they were a prized catch if you get married to one of them. Another character in the Noli is Sisa. She represents Inang Bayan. Sisa is the mother of two boys, Crispin and Basilio, who were serving as sacristans in the church. Crispin died in the hands of an abusive supervisor, and his body was never found. Sisa went around town looking for her lost son, and she went crazy. She lost her mind because of the loss of her son. And the same thing with our Inang Bayan. Rizal is saying that our mother country is in deep sorrow to the point of insanity because of all those who died due to the Spanish abusive rule. The surviving son of Sisa is Basilio. He represents the youth who is the hope of the fatherland, according to Rizal. At the end of the novel, Basilio inherited all the riches of Ibarra, and he received instruction to use it for his education. And so Rizal is saying here, through the character of Basilio, that the youth should invest in education. That will make the life here in our country better. Another important character in the novel is Piloso Potasio. He's an old man roaming the streets of the town of San Diego and giving advices to anyone he sees, including Ibarra. In real life, Rizal's brother Pasiano is his Piloso Potasio. Pasiano gave Jose lots of advice on how to live his life and also about his mission to be the liberator of the Filipino people. Piloso Potasio represents the wisdom of old Filipinos. He represents our ancestors who had a great civilization even before the coming of the Spaniards. So Rizal is trying to say here that we are not dumb as what the Spaniards say. Our race is a very intelligent race. The last character that we will mention is Don Rafael Ibarra, the father of Crisostomo Ibarra. He was persecuted by Padre Damaso because he didn't agree with Padre Damaso in many occasions. And so not all Filipinos during that time bowed down to the Spanish priests and authorities. Some would have their own mind and stand up for what they believe in. And Don Rafael Ibarra represents those kinds of Filipinos. And because they were enemies of the church, they will end up as losers. Friars in that time would plot for the death of such Filipinos. And not only that, friars would also order the digging up of the graves of their enemies, and their bodies would be dumped in the river or in the lake. It's like saying that they don't deserve to be buried in the Catholic cemetery. And so we're sending this filibustero to hell. In real life, this happened to Mariano Herbosa, Rizal's bayaw. After dying and getting buried in the Catholic cemetery, a Spanish friar ordered the digging up of the body of Mariano Herbosa and had the body thrown in the river. Another symbolism of this harrowing event is the Spaniards' deliberate erasing from our memory the greatness of the ancient Malayan culture. The Spaniards in Rizal's time do not want us to look back at how great our civilization was in the pre-colonial times. The Spaniards during Rizal's time taught us that we were barbarians, and everything that we have were given to us by the Spaniards. They taught us some manners, they taught us how to behave like human beings. And so Rizal didn't want that idea to be imprinted in the minds of his fellow men. That's why he wrote the Noli and used this Don Rafael Ibarra story to counter the Spanish teaching prevalent during that time. Now, to conclude this episode, let us try to answer the question, was Rizal pro-revolution based on his Noli Me Tangere? The title itself is very intriguing. It seems to say that Rizal is pro-revolution. Noli Me Tangere is like a warning to the Spaniards. Do not do one more abuse or else the Filipinos will revolt against you. Rizal could also be trying to suggest that there must be unity among the Filipinos in order for such a revolution to succeed. He's saying through the crocodile fight scene that the elite and the masses must join hands in fighting the common enemy. The elite are represented by Ibarra and the masses are represented by Elias. Elias alone cannot defeat the crocodile, which represents Spain. Ibarra had to join Elias in the water in order to defeat the crocodile. So in this scene, we can see that maybe Rizal is really pro-revolution because he is suggesting a strategy to defeat the Spaniards. But a key point in the story is the death of Elias. Elias symbolizes Rizal's revolutionary side, and with his death, it may be a way of Rizal to say that the revolution is not the solution to the problem. Otherwise, Elias should have lived and staged a successful revolution against the Spaniards. Furthermore, we have here the transformation of Ibarra. In the beginning, Crisostomo Ibarra was very diplomatic, but at the end of the Noli, he became bitter and believed in a violent armed struggle. In the next novel, he transformed into the radical-minded Simon, who plotted a revolution. But at the very end of the Fili, Simon, just like Elias, died. A symbolism that a revolution would never work. And so just like in Rizal's time, the people then didn't have a very clear, well-defined idea of whether Rizal was pro-revolution or anti-revolution. Here in the analysis of the Noli, we arrive at the same situation. But nonetheless, even with the death of Elias and Simon, we cannot deny the fact that the Noli Me Tangere, as well as the El Filibusterismo, have served as a big spark to make the Philippine Revolution happen. The Noli can be considered as one of the greatest novels ever in the history of the world because it has changed the life of a country inside out. Because of it, a revolution was hatched and Filipino nationhood was born. So there, we are now done with our lecture for today. I hope you learned many things. Keep on watching the Rizal lectures. This is Sir Jet saying goodbye and thank you.